Today, we explore thought leadership through a case study in diversity officer executive search. How can you better showcase your organization's depth of expertise? We'll look at how thought leadership intersects with executive search, and we'll use that conversation to talk about how you can build a team within your organization to showcase your knowledge. In this episode, I speak with Louis Montgomery Jr. He's the leader of JM Search's Human Resources and Diversity Officer Executive Search Practice. And Louis has been practicing thought leadership himself during his career in executive search. He's worked at both global search firms that have resources in depth, as well as at smaller firms that have to be savvy with every hour and every dollar invested in thought leadership. In this episode, we'll talk about how you demonstrate public expertise to your target audiences. I'm Bill Sherman, and you're listening to Leveraging Thought Leadership. Ready? Let's begin. Louis, you have a number of people who come to you as candidates. They're looking for their next opportunity or where their career could go and grow. What advice do you wind up giving them when they come to you?
Sure. Bill, you're right. I do get lots of people being referred to me because I'm in the search business and, they believe that I have some insights on what kinds of things employers are looking for. And I give people two bits of advice. The first is around networking and really own their own job search. The second piece of advice that I give people that many of them hadn't thought of previously is around creating thought leadership. Everyone is an expert in something. The people that come to me have been doing whatever they've been doing for 15, 20, in some cases, even longer years. And they have insights that other people may not have. And they have insights that could enhance their ability to be candidates for roles. And so that's one of the things that I recommend people do is think about some things that they understand deeper than other people and consider publishing. And I recommend they consider publishing on LinkedIn because it's an easy place to do it and it reinforces their potential candidacy for positions.
So what I hear from you, and I want to give you a chance to sort of dig deeper on this, would be your definition of thought leadership is publicly displaying what you know and demonstrating expertise, or how would you define it?
Yeah, it's that. It's as simple as writing an article about some topic that you have some unique insight or something that you may know better than other people. It doesn't involve necessarily doing deep research, but it's really around something that you know that you can easily put together and share with others.
So, how did you get into the world of thought leadership?
Yeah, thanks for the question. Well, for me, it was once I got into executive search. I had a long career as a human resources practitioner, and I decided about 10 years ago to get into search because I wanted to do something a lot more entrepreneurial and really very, very focused. And one of the things I realized that as a executive search person that I didn't have credibility yet. I had credibility as a human resources person, but I didn't have credibility as an executive search consultant. And so I needed to demonstrate that by getting some work under my belt. And then later the idea came to me to begin to publish some things as a way to, again, demonstrate my expertise. And frankly, when I was in a larger organization than I'm in now, a way to frankly differentiate myself from my colleagues who did similar kinds of work.
So you said you started thought leadership a little bit later rather than when you were in the process of making transition. Was that a year? Was that 2 years in? When did that light bulb come on and say, hey, I could differentiate myself this way?
It was really a couple of years because my initial entree into search, I was in a very, very small firm. And I was frankly focused on just building the work and surviving, making the transition from being inside a large organization to doing something a lot more entrepreneurial. The light bulb really went off for me, Bill, once I joined another organization that was much larger. And one of the things that they had as a firm was a very, very robust thought leadership engine. And I thought, here's a way for me to leverage what this organization has, and at the same time demonstrate my own expertise in a particular area, as well as differentiate myself from my colleagues.
Well, and you talk about differentiating yourself. It sounds like in the larger firm, it gave you a way to differentiate yourself internally, let alone externally for other search firms. Is that correct?
That was it. That was exactly right. It was really a bit of both. It was to create to use a different analogy, to create a swim lane for myself. I decided,
Hmm.
more specifically, I decided I wanted to focus on placing diversity officers in addition to placing HR leaders. And as a result, and I had been a diversity officer, so I
And this
had some.
is back what sort of time frame? Because I know this is
This is the probably 2017 ish,
okay.
2017, 2018 timeframe.
So
So
before the role exploded in visibility and
yes, absolutely. Right,
significance.
right.
Yep.
Absolutely before then. And it was really about leveraging my own expertise to really create more of a practice around this area, to differentiate myself from my colleagues, as I mentioned, but then also to be able to credibly pursue work from clients. And those really the things that I was interested in doing. And then the thought leadership piece that I published, and it was called Leadership Competencies of Next Generation Diversity Officers. So it was a bit of a mouthful, but it was really around what are things that differentiate the most successful diversity officers from others. And it was a collaboration that I did with two other colleagues, and we actually did some research as well to back it up.
So given the title of that, my guess is also you were putting some stakes into the ground in areas that may not have had much surveying done. So you were looking into the future and saying, okay, what is possible? What should we be thinking about from that forward looking perspective? Right.
Yes, absolutely. That, and then also leveraging relationships I had with diversity, because I was doing some work in this space, and it became clear to me that there were some folks that were very, very successful in this space, and there are other people that were struggling. And so the
Mhm.
question for me became, why is it that some folks are being wildly successful in a very challenging area, and why are other people struggling? And so that was sort of the nexus of the idea, along with how then can I turn this insight, well, to test this theory first of all, and then how can I turn this insight into something that I could market, frankly, to prospective clients, as well as give to candidates.
It sounds like that the answer that you gave early on in terms of candidates looking for placement, where you said network and thought leadership, were the two ahas that you came to
Hmm.
in your career. Is that correct?
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah, very true. So it was a very practical thing. It's like, how do I get better? How do I get known? And what are things that candidates can do, frankly, to differentiate themselves from other people that they're competing with?
And you mentioned something that we should pause on. You mentioned when you were at a larger search firm, you said they had a thought leadership engine.
Yes.
Many people work within organizations now where there is a thought leadership function. If you
Hmm.
look down through the org chart, you'll find someone who's responsible for thought leadership. It may be a head of thought leadership title, it might be something else, but
Hmm.
there are opportunities for you to get support or skills and get some practice and help from the organization to develop this. You don't have to be sitting alone on evenings or weekends in front of a blank LinkedIn screen going, what the heck do I write about? Right.
Hmm. No, you're absolutely right. And even with our own organization, while I say we don't, within JM Search, while we don't have a thought leadership engine, we do have a very effective marketing department that can work with us around the creation and the dissemination of the thought leadership. So you're right. Almost every organization has some sort of a marketing function. And I think it's around, how do you leverage that engine to, if you're in the consulting world, how do you do that? Yeah, obviously, if you're a person who doesn't have that available to them per se, but you still can do a lot on your own to publish. And again, it's not necessarily very, very difficult. But you're right, there are a lot of resources that are available. And even if you're in an organization and you're not, actively seeking other kinds of opportunities, you still could leverage the marketing organization and or thought leadership engine within your firm, because again, you will be promoting the firm, because the work that I was doing and still do, I'm promoting obviously my expertise, but I'm also promoting my organization.
And you have the opportunity, even if you're working on a piece, you can say, hey, this is something that I'm working on, I'm writing, or I'm going to put out. How can we collaborate on this so that it's a win win for the firm as well as for what I'm working on? Right.
Yeah.
So, whether you're raising your hand to volunteer and say, hey, you're looking for someone to speak more at conferences or to do some brand building work or reputation work, or if you've got a project you're passionate about, involve your organization. At worst, they're gonna say no, right?
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you mentioned JM Search. How do you use thought leadership at JM Search, which is a smaller, more focused placement firm?
Yeah, and one of the things that I've been very, very pleased since joining the firm is that there are a number of colleagues that are actively involved in creating thought leadership, and we've got a very effective marketing department that helps us to package and disseminate them. So it's something that's very, very active that we have as a firm, and like I said, a lot of colleagues are involved in. I think in part because again, we are a smaller organization. I mean, we're a top 20 firm globally, but again, there's a big difference between the largest five organizations and others. I mean, we're considered a very, very large boutique, but it's been a very effective way for us to demonstrate expertise in particular areas that we're in. So, for instance, as a firm, most of our work is in supporting private equity backed organizations. We place the C-level folks within those organizations, be it CEOs, chief financial officers, heads of HR, chief revenue officers, chief technology officers, and so it's a very, very broad industry, and there's lots of competition in the industry. And so again, what we have done is really carved out different areas, either around our functional expertise or more general information about how to make sure you don't lose a finalist, which is again not sector specific, but obviously it's very, very useful across any number of different sectors. But again, it's been a very, very active program, that an ongoing program that we have within our organization.
So, with that, would you say it's fair that thought leadership is helping the firm punch above its weight?
Oh, absolutely. And again, I contrast what we do at JM Search versus some of the larger firms, is that within our firm, the thought leadership folks who are publishing are also practitioners. What I saw in the larger firm that I was in is that many of the people who were publishing thought leadership weren't necessarily search practitioners. And so this gives us as search practitioners, to me, extra credibility, because again, not only are we doing the search work, but we're also publishing the thought leadership versus doing the search work and being able to refer to our other colleagues within the firm, a specialized area of the firm that are doing this kind of thought leadership. So in a way, to use a different analogy, we're player coaches here, and I think it gives us a lot more credibility with our clients, and has enabled our firm to grow really pretty dramatically over the last several years.
So, how is it impacting your work at JM Search in terms of maybe there's a project you've been working on or a piece that you've put out recently?
Yeah, I'll give you a real life example. I've recently published a piece called "Culture Fit: Hiring for Culture Fit versus I'm sorry, Culture Ad versus Culture Fit." So really contrasting the two. And how this came about was I was given an opportunity through our firm to moderate a panel through Hunt Scanlon Media back in March on this very topic. And so I was a moderator, and there were several other search consultants, and we were talking about this very topic around culture. How does culture impact placement? And one of the things that we talked about is that organizations that are interested in growth and that are interested increasing their footprint around diversity and inclusion need to focus more on how can people be additive to the organization's culture versus fitting into the existing culture. It's a bit of the thing of, if you want different results, you have to do things in a different kind of way, and you want to reach different markets that you're not currently in. You need to look at people who have knowledge of those kinds of markets. And so I moderated this panel, came back, and there was some insights that we gained, and then I worked again with our marketing department to produce a piece on this, which we've published through the Forbes HR Council, and so it's out there in the ecosystem. And then what we've done as well as a follow up is we have sent that article to a wide number of people, many of whom attended the seminar or the conference a few months ago. So we've used it as as a marketing document, as well as to provide some insight around a really important area. And that's something that we've done just very, very recently. And I've gotten at least one call thus far from a potential client because of having them having received this material.
Sounds like you made them think. And that's always a good thing when you're trying to engage and put an idea out there, because they're more likely to come back and say, what else are you thinking? How else can you help us?
That's exactly right. Yeah, because part of what we're hired for is, obviously it's around how do we find great candidates for our clients, but they're also hiring us for our insights. Our clients are experts on their business. They are not necessarily experts on what does the HR landscape look like at this point in time, or what does the landscape look like for diversity officers or for any other. We have that kind of expertise. And so thought leadership, along with obviously our insights from working with candidates in the market on an ongoing basis, is very, very valuable to our clients, because we know the market, they know what they're looking for, and so we're able to translate their needs into what the market looks like, and then to find the right kind of candidates for them.
If you are enjoying this episode of Leveraging Thought Leadership, please make sure to subscribe. If you'd like to help spread the word about the podcast, please leave a 5-star review and share it with your friends. We are available on Apple Podcast, Spotify, and all major platforms, as well as at leveragingthoughtleadership.com. So I can imagine a listener who's thinking and saying, yeah, this is great. I wish I had time to write an article or, to speak at a conference. What I'd love to hear is, how does this integrate into sort of your scope of work, and how much time has it taken you to start, and I know you said this is a journey you've been on a while. How much time did you spend at the beginning, and how much time do you spend these days on thought leadership?
Yeah. I've actually, believe it or not, I've actually increased the amount that I've done. When I started, I published a couple of things, and one was, and also did a speaking engagement as well, and that gave me sort of the impetus to do it. But again, I was in a larger firm at that time, and they had more of an engine that I could leverage. I joined JM Search in March of last year to establish our human resources and diversity officers practice, and we're also doing some work in the nonprofit space. And so what I needed to do was to really ramp up our efforts. We didn't have this function within the organization. So I have published more in the last year and a half than I published over the prior 7 years, because of, again, a necessity to do so, to do a lot more marketing to help build the practice. And I envision that I will continue to do that. And I'm also going to encourage other colleagues within the practice to do the same.
But is it, on doing more, is it eating into evenings and weekends, or have you gotten quicker at it? Give me a sense of, for the people who are going, how do I fit this into my day? Right. How do you do it?
It is an evening and weekend kind of thing. So you have to sacrifice something. If you want to do something different than what you've been doing, you got to decide what are you going to give up. So I don't necessarily watch a lot of TV. So that's one of the things that I do. But I do have an active household. We've got two boys that are 16 and 11 that are very active in doing things. So it's a trade off. And so there's other things that I don't do. But again, it's the kind of thing that I believe when something's important to you, you'll find a way to do it, and or some pieces are easy to write. Sometimes you get inspired. I'll give you an example. Several years ago when I was at another firm, I had a colleague who I was working with on a project reached out to me to say, he wanted some insight from me on this topic of diversity, but more specifically, what's appropriate nomenclature? What's appropriate to say? Do you call a person a quote a diversity candidate? You say person of color? What do you say? Mm-hmm. And we had a great conversation about him, and I told him that, in my opinion, that diversity candidate was one. It was very, very inaccurate, nebulous, and somewhat offensive, frankly, because again, diversity means difference, and all of us represent dimensions of diversity. However, many of our clients who are interested in improving the representation of their workforces are interested in hiring more individuals of color. And so I described that to him, and I specifically talked about the evolution of the term Black, how years ago it was perfectly okay to refer to a Black person as mulatto, later became colored, later became Negro. We went through a period of Afro-American, and then more recently, the term Black. And what I did as a result of that conversation, Bill, I said, this is a topic that a lot of people might be interested in knowing more about. So I wrote a piece. I sat down and just banged it out over the course of a few days and published it on my LinkedIn. And I used the heading of "Now What Did You Call Me?" So sort of a little bit of a provocative title, and it just talked about, again, nomenclature. So the point is, that was something that I hadn't planned to write, but because of a conversation that I had with a colleague and a need that I saw to educate other colleagues and people more broadly on a topic that a lot of people might be confused about, I wrote a piece.
That's a fantastic example, Lewis, and I want to build on it for a moment. So one of the things that you didn't mention, but is a skill which is worth building, is that ear, right? To notice, oh, this is a question that other people will have. Or you've been in 3 calls or 3 meetings and you're like, I answered that question the same way. You jot it down, you take a note, whether it's in a moleskin or on a Post-it or something. And then it becomes easy to come back to when you say, I need to create a piece. You go, oh, yeah, I had this good turn of phrase, or this idea, it's worth developing. You don't start with that blank sheet, right? But developing that ear so that this is something other people will be interested in is one of the best skills for thought leadership.
Yeah, I agree.
You have to listen to yourself.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, just being aware. I'll give you another example of that, Bill. Last year, I worked on a project with a colleague on a board search. And ultimately, the client chose a person who had an HR background. And that's not where they were going initially, but they said based on what they wanted to do with this board, they wanted to, one, diversify the board to get more women as well as individuals of color on the board. The board was pretty heavily weighted with people with financial and or banking backgrounds, and they didn't necessarily want that. They wanted another perspective. And we ended up presenting a number of individuals, most of whom had backgrounds, but not all, but had backgrounds in human resources. And the person that they ultimately chose had a human resources background, and they did have some financial services as well. Well, guess what? I said, this is another insight. And so I decided to publish a piece, and it's called The 4 Challenges Your Boardroom Will Handle Better with an HR Leader on it. And so again, it was a similar to what you just described. It was like, based upon actual work experience conversations had with the client and insights that we developed as a result of that. And so you're right. So it wasn't like I had to think of something; it was right there. It was really a matter of how do I take this experience and write it in such a way that it's going to be useful for clients.
And I think one of the things that I've learned over the years is through consulting, the questions that I get asked are often ones that many people have. There are
Hmm.
very few questions which are truly unique,
Sure.
right? Yeah.
No, you're absolutely right. There's always nuance, but you're right. There are questions that if one person has it, 1,000 people may have it. And I think again, as a consultant, you're trying to market yourself and market your expertise. It's a matter of as you said, it's a matter of listening to what questions are being asked and then providing an answer to those questions.
So, do you find joy in practicing thought leadership? And if so, where does it come?
Yeah, I do. I do. One of the things that I realized, and the reason that I made the transition into executive search, is that I really wanted to go deep. I really wanted to develop a real expertise, and I wanted to be, frankly, viewed as an expert in a space. And again, as I talked about before, one of the things I realized is that I wasn't viewed that way, and but one of the ways in which I could demonstrate it was by creating and publishing thought leadership. And so it has been something of interest to me. I know your listeners can't see the background, but you and I are both surrounded by books. So I've been a bookworm for quite some time. I've published one book. I've got another book or two in my head that that I'll write eventually. And for me, it's been both a creative outlook or creative pursuit, as well as something that's been very practical based upon the work that I do. So you're right, it is something I enjoy doing. It's challenging at times with if I'm stuck or thinking about something that I want to write, it can be challenging. But what I have found more often than not, Bill, is that there's inspiration all around, and it's just a matter of listening for the inspiration and then taking the time to capture it.
So, as we begin to wrap up, Lewis, I want you to think back to when you started out on the journey as a thought leadership practitioner and,
Hmm.
that first article, that first speech. What advice would you give the younger version of yourself?
Yeah, I would say great question. I'd say, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. Start sooner. There's things that I probably could have written long ago that I didn't. That the opportunity came and went. But I think be very very. I don't want to say be creative, but be courageous. There's opportunities to demonstrate thought leadership in any number of different areas, and I think it's a like any other muscle or skill, it's one that can be developed over time. So the sooner one begins to develop this, the better a person's gonna be at doing this. So that's the one bit of advice I'd give my younger self is do it sooner, and especially when I made the and I think in particular when I made the transition from being a HR practitioner to being a executive search consultant, that would have been a sort of a great time to do it. But again, I didn't see it at the time. That came later. But again, I tell job seekers all the time, the best time to find another job is when you already have one. And so, and one of the ways in which to do that is by again creating thought leadership, demonstrating your expertise. And again, there's no reason why people can't do that at any time, long before they're even thinking about the next opportunity. This is a way to get some publicity, and to get some additional looks that they might not have gotten otherwise.
It can attract a little bit of attention, it can be a tiebreaker. And one of the things about thought leadership is it has a compounding effect.
Hmm.
The longer that tail is and the more work you've done on it, the greater the impact you can have.
Oh, Absolutely, I agree more. I couldn't agree more. Over the last, like I said, almost year and a half, I think I've published a half dozen pieces. I've done a couple of webinars, and so I've got a nice body of work. So if you go to our website and you click on me, you'll see all this work that I've published in the space. And obviously, that's a differentiator. The fact that not only do I do the work, but I've got this other expertise that folks that they might be comparing me to don't have. That could be a tiebreaker.
Do you wind up getting people who have listened to one or more of the webinars or read a piece and they reach out almost cold to you and then start quoting you back to you? And it's like, oh, you were listening in. Do you get that?
I have gotten it, and I hope to get even more. I had a call last week with a potential client who had listened to a webinar that I had done and reached out to me on the basis of that. And so, that's a big opportunity. So I mean, that's just that's just one. And like, there's many more people that are out there that have heard it. So part of what my challenge is to connect with them and get conversations with them proactively, as opposed to waiting for them, because again,
Right.
I don't know when they may have a need.
Exactly. Lewis, thank you for taking time today. This has been a delightful conversation.
Bill, I have thoroughly enjoyed it. I appreciate the opportunity to be on your show.
If you're interested in organizational thought leadership, then I invite you to subscribe to the OrgTL newsletter. Each month, we talk about the people who create, curate, and deploy thought leadership on behalf of their organizations. Go to the website orgtl.com and choose Join Our Newsletter. I'll leave a link to the website as well as my LinkedIn profile in the show notes. Thanks for listening, and I look forward to hearing what you thought of the show.